Today we are going to study about CO2 transport. CO2 transport mainly occur in three forms: dissolved form, which is least common form of CO2 transport; bicarbonate, which is most common form of CO2 transport; third one is carbaminohemoglobin, which is second most common form of CO2 transport. We will see what happen at tissue level. At tissue level, increased amount of CO2 inside the blood lead to the displacement of oxygen from the hemoglobin. This is known as the Bohr's effect. As we already know, production of CO2 happen at the tissue level. Since amount of CO2 increases inside the blood, this leads to weaken the bond between oxygen and hemoglobin and lead to release of the oxygen, which is used by the tissue, and lead to free of the hemoglobin. This free form of hemoglobin is used for transport of CO2. As we know, transport of CO2 mainly occur in three forms: dissolved form, which is least common form of CO2 transport, which happen in both plasma and RBC. Second one is carbaminohemoglobin. What happens inside the RBC? CO2 react with amine radical of the hemoglobin and lead to formation of carbaminohemoglobin. This is most common form of CO2 transport, which happen through the RBC. Third one is bicarbonate ion. As we know, the concentration of carbonic anhydride inside the RBC is more than the plasma. So formation of bicarbonate ion happen inside the RBC. What happen when CO2 react with molecule of water in presence of carbonic anhydride lead to formation of carbonic acid. This carbonic acid further ionize into H plus ion and bicarbonate ion. But these bicarbonate ion has to be exported from RBC to plasma. This happen in exchange with the chloride ion, and this is known as the chloride shift. And this H plus ion react with hemoglobin and form HHBS. This is the how transportation of CO2 happen at the tissue level. Now we are going to see what happen at the alveoli level. At alveoli level, binding of oxygen with hemoglobin tend to displacement of CO2 from the blood. This is known as the Haldane effect. What happens? As we already know, partial pressure of oxygen at alveoli level is 100 mmHg, means partial pressure of oxygen increases. This leads to binding of the oxygen with hemoglobin and lead to formation of stronger acid. Here hemoglobin becomes stronger acid, and this lead to displacement of CO2 from blood into alveoli, and it happen mainly in two ways. First, we will see what happen. The highly acidic hemoglobin has less tendency to combine with CO2 to form carbaminohemoglobin, and this lead to release of the CO2 in carbamino form, and from blood it releases to alveoli and further from alveoli to outside the environment. And second one, what happened? The acidity of hemoglobin increases and lead to release of the excess of H plus ion. This H plus ion further react with bicarbonate ion and lead to formation of carbonic acid. But the bicarbonate ion was present inside the plasma. So what happened? Reverse chloride shift happened, means bicarbonate has to import it inside RBC and chloride ion has to export it from RBC to outside the plasma. This is known as reverse chloride shift, which happen at the level of alveoli. Now the H plus ion react with bicarbonate ion and form carbonic acid, which further dissociated into water and CO2. This CO2 now releases from blood to alveoli and further from alveoli to outside environment. Now, as we know, partial pressure of CO2 at alveoli is 40 mmHg and partial pressure of CO2 at blood is 45 mmHg. This change in partial pressure of CO2 lead to release of the dissolved form of CO2 from blood to alveoli and from alveoli to outside environment. This is how the transportation of CO2 happen. Now we are going to study about CO2 dissociation curve. Here, this is the graph of CO2 dissociation curve. At the level of tissue, partial pressure of CO2 is 46 mmHg, partial pressure of O2 is 40 mmHg. What happened at this level? The 52% volume of CO2 have been transported by 100 ml of blood. What happened at the alveoli level? Here, the partial pressure of CO2 is 40 mmHg and partial pressure of O2 is 100 mmHg. At this point of the time, only 50% volume of CO2 have been transported by 100 ml of blood. Means 2% volume of CO2 have been lost. Because of the presence of Haldane effect, which is happened due to change in partial pressure of O2, the graph is slightly shifted downward. Means at alveoli level, what happened? Instead of 50% volume of CO2, here is 48% volume of CO2 have been exported, which means change in the volume of CO2 is 4%. Means 4 ml of CO2 have been carried by 100 ml of blood, which is only possible because of this Haldane effect. If Haldane effect was not present, only 2% volume of CO2 is lost. But because of presence of this Haldane effect, approximately double the volume of CO2 have been lost. Means instead of 4 ml, means instead of 2 ml, 4 ml of volume